Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to bring you my next guest, William Ury. William has been such a big inspiration to me over the years, as he has been to so many other people. He's one of the world's leading experts on negotiation and conflict resolution. He co founded the program on negotiation at Harvard and co authored Getting to Yes, which was a huge bestseller and game changer around the world. Also, has written many books, one of them, Getting to Peace, which isn't as well known, but totally inspired me and inspired my first podcast, the Peacebuilding podcast. His most recent book is called Possible: How We Survive and Thrive in an Age of Conflict. He's written a lot of other books, done a lot of podcasts, conversations, talks. He's really a very prolific person. And most importantly, he spent more than 40 years mediating and serving as an advisor to the most difficult conflicts all around the world. As you know, in season one of the Collaborative Hardball podcast, what I'm doing is each podcast episode is corresponding to a chapter of my book, Collaborative Hardball. And this episode will correspond very loosely to chapter 4 of my book, which is called Speak the Powerful Language of Needs and Interests, because that was a fundamental message of Getting to Yes. But William and I went way deeper with this conversation because it feels warranted with this razor's edge that we seem to be walking on our planet today, with AI, a rapidly warming planet, and all the other polycrises we're grappling with. And so we called this episode The Third Side: How We Learn to Live Together. We're going to cover a lot of topics which are very dear to my heart, and many of which were introduced to me by William. The first is that, in spite of the conventional wisdom, humans are way more collaborative than we are adversarial. There's tons of evidence that supports this, that our ancestors, and William is trained as an anthropologist, would tell us just that, as well as advise us to slow down and listen. We talked about the power of the circle, creating containers to cook conflict well and think systemically, what William likes to call the third side, the surrounding community that stands up for peaceful transformation of conflict. As he says, it takes two sides to fight, but a third side to stop. Which brings us to women and the special role that I believe women, as half of humanity, can play in moving us toward a more peaceful and sustainable planet. William would agree that women are the preeminent third siders, and he has lots of anecdotes to support that conclusion that he'll share in this episode. How each negotiation or each conflict communication in which we engage is a cultural act and a manifestation of the choices we are making about the world we want to create, and so much more. William is a great storyteller. This episode is full of stories, and I know you're going to really enjoy it. So I bring you William Ury. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. As I've told you and have put in my book, what an inspiration. You created such a guiding path for me, for so many people, and so appreciative of that, and very also appreciative of the blurb that you gave me for my book. That was really helpful. Thank you so much. And
You're so welcome. You're
yeah,
so welcome. You're doing such great work.
thank you. Thank you. Trying. It's always interesting to think, how can one contribute, make a difference with one's presence. So anyway, you have been, I said, gave you the license to talk whatever you want to talk about, but I also have some questions. So I'll guess maybe I'll start there, and
Sure,
you
definitely.
fill in as you want to. But you obviously are very well known around the world as somebody who's masterful with negotiation, with the book Getting to Yes, and that you wrote with Roger Fisher, and had that whole movement that has made such a difference around the world. And I guess I wonder, it's been so exciting for me, and I wonder how things have changed for you in 50 years. I think one of the things that has interested me about your work is that it hasn't just been about resolving conflict, although of course negotiation is I guess, in my mind, the preeminent way of doing that. But I mean, your thinking has seemed to be much more about how are we going to live together on the planet? And that's what's excited me most. I mean, ever since you wrote that book, Getting to Peace, which whatever, that was a long time ago, but it really made a difference to me. I really appreciated that book.
That touches me because getting to peace was a real labor of love and over about a decade.
What do you
And
mean by that, William? That it was a
it
labor of
was
love?
it was kind of something dear to my heart. It wasn't something the publisher or anybody else really wanted. Anybody else. And it was kind of born out of that question you just asked, which is how do we humans live together? And particularly at this time when our technologies, our ability to kind of create these amazing technologies, including technologies for destruction, seems to be going at such a rapid pace, and our abilities to, our social, emotional, moral, cultural, psychological abilities to actually coexist and live together and deal with our differences are being challenged because if we don't actually crack the code on this, which is a code that's been in us for, millions of years, and learn how to coexist with these technologies, there's a very real risk that the technologies will put an end to human existence.
The
And this is
code,
kind
the
of
code being
of
being.
how do we cooperate?
Mhm,
How do we collaborate,
mhm.
as you put it in your book? How do we collaborate with all of our deepest and darkest and most profound differences? And how do we learn to celebrate those differences instead of turning the differences always into issues of contention? So that book was a kind of a deep dive to look. Was curious as an anthropologist because that was my original training
I
was
know.
to
Yeah.
really what do our ancestors have to say to us
Mm.
and what have we learned because we're mostly kind of oblivious of our ancestors of where we come from, but everything, our bodies, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate, everything has been shaped by thousands of generations of our ancestors to whom we give very little thought and very little gratitude to everything. Our language, our ability to communicate like this, I mean, this evolved over so long. And, the mystery of being human right now on the planet at this particular moment in life, at this particular moment in the human story is what's always sort of fascinated me. And within that, our ability to collaborate. If I was sometimes I like to imagine like I'm a Martian anthropologist. I'm an anthropologist from
Maybe
Mars.
you are.
I could be. It might just be. And and just looking at, studying the human tribe, right now, humanity with all of its beauties and sorrows and griefs and joys and, and successes and failures and traumas. And, to say, wow, what strikes me is, we have in us the ability to collaborate. We have the ability, we have such creativity. There's actually no problem in the world right now of all the major problems that face us that we can't address effectively if only we can tap into our innate ability to cooperate,
Mm,
to get to yes, as it
mm,
were. And the only thing that seems to be in our way is this kind of we fall into these traps, of the kind of the win-lose trap of okay, who's going to win, who's going to lose, and let's fight about it. And if we can crack that, if we can crack the code on that, then we can create an incredible world because I was thinking about it. People ask me if I'm a optimist or a pessimist after all these years of working in world's war zones and in war zones big and small. And I like to say, well, actually, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know exactly what the future brings, but I'm a possibilist, because I believe in human possibility and I believe humanity, human beings. I mean, I was just thinking about this before our call, but we may not be Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens means the wise one. In fact, we
mhm.
call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens, which is a little bit of a leap, given,
Hmm.
we're the intelligent, wise creatures.
That's the
That
official name, Homo sapiens sapiens.
yeah, Homo sapiens sapiens is the name of
Didn't
our
know that.
that we've given ourselves.
Hmm.
So maybe that's an aspiration.
Hmm. Okay.
And but we're actually fundamentally Homo possibilists. We
I like
have
that.
incredible possibilities. And some of them right now could be very negative possibilities, and some of them could be very positive possibilities. And guess what? We get to choose. And we're in that generation, in that era right now, where we're walking a kind of razor's edge and we get to choose what life we want to create on this planet.
It does feel like we're on some kind of a brink to me, I think to probably to so many of us. And I wonder if our ancestors that you know of were talking to us, what would they say to us?
That's a really good question. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is slow down,
Mm,
pause, breathe, look around you, listen, listen to what's happening, listening to just see, just look around you and see for a moment. Just close your eyes for a moment and just imagine all 8 billion of us on this planet right now, breathing, some of them getting up, some of them going to work, some of them going to sleep, whatever, they're loving, fighting, cooperating. Actually, if you just took a look at an interior photograph of this of everything that's happening on the planet right now, you'd probably see that probably more than 90%, I would say more than 95% of that behavior is actually cooperative.
mhm,
People, mothers sending their kids to school, people working together in teams, working together in the household, in the community, mixing, watching World Cup matches, whatever. It's like a very small percentage of it would fall into the category of what we think of as fighting.
mhm,
And yet, our ancestors would say, wake up and see that. It's not somehow in our minds, we imagine, okay, we're the fighting species, we're the warring species. It's in our nature, it's in our genes. That's who we are. Is it really?
mhm,
Take a look.
mhm,
Take a look at humanity, but really honestly. No rosy colored glasses or anything, but just honestly, and to realize, it's not a question of going from 0 to 100 to actually get to peace.
mhm,
It's actually more like going from 90 to 100.
mhm. Wow, that's a lovely thought. That's a lovely thought. Yeah. So they would be saying to us, pay
Yeah,
attention to just how much cooperation is actually happening on this planet and how maybe that's more of our DNA than the very small percentage that is really about coercion, about fighting, about dominate, the need to dominate.
it's true. I think that's indisputably true. I mean, if anyone just took a really look at what's going on, just look around you, just walk down the streets, see. What do you see? Human beings, we're cooperating, we're communicating. I mean, now we have the internet. We're just like a lot. We're the creature born to love, to communicate, to be connected. And we have language. Language was designed to cooperate. Why did language arise? It was is a tool to cooperate, to kind of create mutual gain.
Mm, mhm,
We are the mutual gain creatures par excellence, and we don't see it. And our ancestors would just kind of like tell us to kind of take off the blinders because we're blinding ourselves right now with our image of ourselves. We have a pretty negative image of ourselves as a
mm,
species and as a thing, and just like see the wonder of humanity. And then within that context, welcome all. I mean, that's another thing is take off your blinders and welcome all the dark side. Welcome all the conflicts, all the traumas, bring it all up to the surface even, but welcome it, embrace it. Don't blind yourself to it, but welcome it and then ask, okay, within that larger embrace of cooperation, whatever, how do we slowly begin to transform, to heal these things? Because they're all, I mean, in my life, it's now been it's a half century this year that I've been engaged in this kind of
mm,
professional quest around this
mm,
question of
mm,
how can we human beings deal with our deepest differences? How can we live together? And I've traveled far reaches of the world into the darkest, hot spots in war zones. And I have to say, so it's like, you can see humanity at all its worst, but you can see humanity at all its best in those zones actually too.
mm,
That's another thing.
mhm,
We imagine like the Middle East, I spent quite a bit of time in the Middle East because the Middle East is like, it's kind of widely regarded as the iconic, most difficult place, the most conflictual place. But it's and it has its conflicts, it has its wars, it has everything. You've got to keep your eyes open to that. At the same time, it has the most hospitable people,
Yeah, the
bar
famous,
none on the planet.
yeah, the
I mean,
famous Arab hospitality. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and it's like it's astonishing how kind people are to
Hmm.
just perfect strangers.
Mm-hmm.
And it always astonishes us. And so it's just like see reality in its full complexity. And I think that's what we're being invited to do right now. I'm looking, I don't know, I'm kind of a spin here, but I'm looking at the photograph behind you there
Mm.
of our ancestors would be saying, hey, look at the planet. Look how beautiful it is.
Right,
And, these astronauts who just went up there, for example, and took another picture on the other side of the moon.
right,
And they came back wowed. I mean, like stunned,
right.
stunned, just to kind of that perspective, that orbital perspective of that kind of, I would call it a giant balcony, giant balcony, that big perspective of looking at it. And Christina Koch, Koch, I don't know
Hmm.
how
Yeah,
she pronounces her
the
last
one of
name.
the astronauts. Yeah.
Yeah, she goes by her code name on Instagram, Astro Christina. Anyway,
Uh-huh.
she's astonishing, and so she was asked at a press conference or some kind of meeting, like, what was it like up there? And because all the astronauts were talking, and she said something like, it was so touching. She said, people have always been asking me as an astronaut, what's a crew? How's a crew differ from a team? And she said, I gave lots of answers, but I have to tell you, the answers were pretty useless. But when I got up there, I realized what a crew is. A crew, we all live together, breathe together. It's like we're rowing together. We're a crew, and it's not that we have differences, and they all acknowledge that it's not so easy to be cooped up there in that little spaceship. So they
Yeah,
had their differences and
really.
human differences, but they were able to.
Particularly when
They
the
talked
toilet
about that.
doesn't function.
Exactly, you can imagine.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And she said something like, we had our differences. We work, and they all talked about how they worked through their differences. They became a third, what I call, a third side
Hmm.
that actually, but a whole. They were a whole. And then she said something.
What do you mean by a third side? Because I'm not sure everybody
Oh,
knows
a
that.
third side is just the name I give for, there's always in conflicts, we always imagine there's two sides. There's Arabs and Israelis, and there's labor and management and all of that. But what we can learn from our ancestors is that they always knew there was a third side, which is a third side is the larger community. It's the
Hmm.
larger whole
Mm,
surrounding the two sides, of which the two sides form a part.
mm,
And actually, our birthright as human beings in every indigenous culture and in even every culture, the principal way of dealing with conflict wasn't just, two sides trying to fight, negotiate or fight it out, but actually it all takes place within a larger context. It
mm,
might be the work team, it
mm,
might be the family, it might be
mm,
the community, it might be the world, whatever it is. There is this larger whole. I mean, this is something I noticed when I first went to Africa to work on the situation of apartheid, huge injustice in the 80s in South Africa. I'd always wanted to go visit the people who are popularly known as the Bushmen, but they're called the San and the Kwa. They give themselves their own name
mhm,
somehow. And who are the kind of the Aboriginal indigenous population
mhm,
peoples of Africa, and particularly of Southern Africa. And there were still, and they until recently lived pretty much like our ancestors lived for 99% of our time on the planet, which was hunting and gathering and that
mhm,
kind of lifestyle. And they live in sort of small groups of about, 25 or so, and then within networks of about 500. And they roam, they're
mhm.
nomadic. And so I went to visit two groups of them, one in Botswana and one in Namibia, and just stayed with them. And I was just curious and asking the elders, how do they deal with conflict? And I was able also to witness it. And the way they deal with conflict is, and they have a problem. It was interesting because I had just come from a meeting in Moscow in the days of communism about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was with Soviets and Americans and the survivors of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it seemed like, wow, we were very lucky not to have gone to nuclear war then. We wouldn't be around. We wouldn't be having this conversation. And so I was really questioning that. And then in a small scale society here in Southern Africa, they have the same problem actually, because the men hunt with, they use a kind of a poison that they get from the dung of a beetle to basically stun the animal. And that's how they hunt. But that poison is fatal to human beings as well. So they all have these arrows and this poison around them. So you're in a group of 25 and someone gets angry, and all they have to do is, it's like an injection, pick up an arrow with the poison and
That's the end
inject
of you.
someone. And that's the end of you. So you can imagine, to their a small scale society, they're all living with nuclear bombs. I
Right,
mean, things that can destroy the whole society.
right.
And they all are human. So, they have emotions and they get jealous and they get this and whatever. So my question was, so if that's how our ancestors lived, how did we survive? And the thing about the poison too is it takes about 3 days to work fully.
Oh,
So that
lovely.
person has the time to pick up another arrow and
Ah!
shoot someone else. And then within a couple of minutes, you've got, you've lost 60% of your hunting capacity. And
Right.
it's like, as a group, how do you deal with that? How do you live with that knowledge, which is the problem we're facing today, is how do we live with the knowledge of how to destroy everyone at scales, beyond our imagination? And what they do is they listen, they all listen, and they hear someone starting to argue. They listen emotionally. They're emotionally intelligent, so
Mm.
they listen. And when voices start to rise, or when they know someone's kind of angry, and they feel each other's emotions, someone goes and hides the poison arrows out in the desert.
That's a good idea.
And
That's a good
then
idea.
all the family and friends of the parties, the disputing parties, hey, we're going to sit down, and we sit down around the campfire. So they all sit around in a circle around the campfire. We're talking about the women, the men, the children, everybody talking, and sometimes they're talking all at once. And they listen to each other, and the stories are told,
Hmm.
and the elders listen. And they take as long as they need. They'll
Hmm.
take 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it is. And at night, what they do is they do a kind of a trance dancing around the fire,
Wow.
where through rhythmic beating, they kind of go into a kind of a trance state, and
Wow.
then ask the ancestors and ask
Wow.
the gods,
Yeah, yeah,
like for wisdom,
yeah,
and then they come back and communicate that to the group.
yeah.
How should we do this? So they use all the human modalities,
Wow.
the social, the
Yeah,
emotional, the spiritual modalities,
yeah,
to try to, like, how do we deal with this? And then often it takes like 3, 4 days, and then a kind of consensus emerges that's often voiced by the elders. And it's not like they don't rest with, okay, this is how it's going to be resolved. Okay,
mhm,
this is the resolution. There's that too. But there has to be a repair of the relationship,
mm.
because they all have to live together.
Right.
And so there has to be some reconciliation. And sometimes people aren't ready to reconcile,
Yeah,
like we all are, right?
yeah.
So the elders will say, hey, why don't you go, and one of them, why don't you go and visit, both of you, why don't you go and visit relatives at a neighboring waterhole for a few months?
Cool
And
down
there's a
for a
kind
while.
of
Cool down. Mm,
cooling off period. Exactly
mhm.
what I'd experienced when I worked in the coal mines. You have cooling off periods,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's the same thing. Time out. They have a whole system, basically, a system for dispute resolution and for relationship reconciliation.
yeah.
And then it dawned on me, what is that mechanism? It's the third side. It's the involvement of the community.
Right,
It's not just neutrals. It's like the friends and the family,
right.
everyone has a stake.
It's a
And
much
even
more
the part,
systemic approach. Like a,
you got it.
yeah,
And even the parties themselves
yeah,
are
yeah,
part of the third side, because
yeah,
everyone's part.
yeah,
And so it's like, what's best, just not only for the parties, but what's best for the whole, and at the whole, together, any one person may only have some amount of influence, but all people together searching for what's the right path forward. There's an incredible power there. And it suddenly dawned on me that that's maybe why we're all here, because we survived
yeah,
with the same situation of how to live with technology that can be immensely destructive. But we learned by harnessing the power of the community, and that's our birthright, that's our heritage.
yeah.
And our great challenge today is to reinvent that in ways that serve our world today.
Well, AI, which you mentioned, and climate situation is clearly putting on the pressure on us
Definitely.
to get it together. And then it seems to me, I was just listening to Pat McCabe. I don't know if you know her. She's with the Dene and the Lakota, but she had gone to a conference where she was talking about, I guess it was had to do with money, and there were tech bros there, and there were a lot of different people there about money. But, some of the messaging among some of them was, we just need to actually extract what we need from the planet and go to a different planet. And we don't mind if we actually get rid of a bunch of humanity in the process. And that's very dark. But it's something that I think we're living with is that it does seem like there's some people who are fine with not looking at humanity as a whole, but actually some people being way more important than others. And how do we invoke this because the imagery you just painted is so beautiful, and it feels to me like the circle is so much the original form of healing and community. And in my own life as a mediator and somebody that's done a lot of this kind of work, I always feel like when you're able to get the whole system in the room and actually have a conversation, you've gone a long way to actually being able to do something about it.
That's when the
But
magic happens.
but to do that, I don't know. Yeah, any thoughts about like how at this moment in time, I mean, I got trained as a lawyer. I think you did. No, you didn't get trained as lucky you didn't get trained as a lawyer.
Most people think I am a lawyer
Yeah, I know,
because
I know. You're
I'm
right,
still associated with Harvard Law School,
right, right,
but
right, right,
and
right.
I actually almost became a lawyer. I got into Harvard Law School and then I kept on postponing it
Yeah.
until I didn't I ultimately didn't go.
But
But I
William,
feel like
our
I'm a
legal
lawyer.
system is the
Yeah,
adversary. The American legal
yeah,
system is the adversary system. It is win-lose. It is, it is
yeah.
rights-based. And it is not about getting into a circle. And we need to get into, I don't know. It strikes me that we need to be getting into circles. And I don't know what your thoughts are about how to create that kind of cultural shift.
It's so interesting. You're right. That's the great challenge. And the third side is a circle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a circle. It's a circle around us all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of which we're part.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so fascinating about a circle is there's no head of the circle, right? And everyone is kind of equal in an equal point around the circle. There's a beautiful, and the
Mm-hmm.
circle is the original convening as our ancestors all sat around the campfire in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And we circle around, and that's the challenge in today's world, which is how do we create those circles of influence?
Mm-hmm.
The circles of it's almost like an image, conflict, you know, as you and I would agree, conflict is something natural, right? Actually in some sense actually the world needs more conflict, not less
I
conflict
loved your
in a
comment.
sense.
The world, you need to make the world safe for conflict. That was such a great,
Right, definitely.
comment.
We do because conflict is how change happens. It's how we address injustice and inequities and all of that.
Right,
We need to engage it. So we actually need more conflict. At the same time, we need to create the containers for conflict.
right,
And what you were talking about when you get the whole system in the room, that's a container,
right,
becomes a container. We need those containers, which are like crucibles within which the conflict can be cooked, slowly and transformed. Cooking is the ancient art of transformation. You transform something that can't is indigestible to something that's digestible.
mm.
We have to learn to cook our conflicts, right? And
I like that.
sometimes you have to
Yeah,
cook them for a long time, but
yeah,
that's okay. Patience is part of the success. And I think so in today's world, we're learning that, like after World War II, after World War One, there was the kind of like we need to do something about we'll create the League, and then that didn't quite work. And then after World War II, they created the UN. The UN is kind of, even the Security Council sits in a circle. Interesting. Even in, I'm just reminded of the conversations around the global environment that take place every year, the COP. That was when it came to Durban. I can't remember. That was maybe back in trying to year what it was, but it moves to a different city every year. But it was in Durban in the early 2000s, and the South Africans took their traditional way of dealing with conflict, which is to sit in council, a circle. They called
mm,
it indaba,
mm.
and it's the same thing as the Bushmen sitting around their circles
Yeah, yeah.
around the campfire. And they brought that, they introduced that as a kind of a modality into the modern kind of like, UN. We're
Right.
all sitting facing the speaker and then one speaker after another, and that setup. And they brought that in, and it was very useful, and so useful that when it came to the Paris one, which was in 2015, I believe, the meeting in Paris,
That's right.
the UN Special Envoy is an amazing woman mediator by the name of Cristina Figueres they
Uh-huh.
decided to adopt that.
Hmm.
So they would have a room there in Paris where, the usual room where, the world leaders has them in front and everyone's taking notes, or no, not even taking notes, or not even talking, not even listening hardly, and people are rambling on. And then in a separate room, they had a circle where you could fit, I think it was like 250 people around a circle, and then another layer of 250. It was a
Mm,
huge room
mm,
where everyone was equal.
mm.
There was no hierarchy.
Right.
And that was a room in which, like the smaller states, like some of the states, they're, I don't know, the island states, for example, where climate change now is meaning that they're
Right.
losing their homes because the
Right.
water is rising over their homes. And everyone could speak. The developing countries could speak. Everyone could speak what was on their heart, what was on their mind, what was keeping them. And the Paris 2015 was, by all agreements, the most successful,
Right.
the most impactful
Right.
COP there ever was,
Right.
in good measure, by harnessing
Right.
the power of the circle to allow it's exactly, like our ancestors sitting around the campfire.
I can't tell
Speak.
you how many, I've done a lot of work with the UN and how many times I have come in, with different kind, the idea is trying to get to people work together. And I've come in and the room has been set up in this very hierarchical way. And I've come in and moved it all around and everybody's freaking out. But then we're sitting in a circle and people, lo and behold, they come up with good agreements, because
That's
you
it.
got rid of the podium, got rid of, all of the fixed structures. And actually people could all sit in a circle. They could actually see each other.
You don't have a table separating you,
You
so
don't have
you're
a,
kind of like your whole
yeah,
your
yeah.
body, your being. Everyone's kind of vulnerable, a little bit vulnerable, and your mask has to kind of fall a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So, William, my work, I've been trying to put an address on some of what I've been doing and speak directly to women, potentially as a third side. I mean, it's whatever. It's not like we have research that say that, oh, women are more collaborative than men. I don't know if we know that, but certainly there's some pointers that suggest that we have more inclination towards that, or maybe again, as Pat McCabe said, women haven't been living inside men's nations, so that what she calls men's nations, so we haven't had to adopt some of the behaviors that haven't always been helpful. I'm wondering if you have any comments to say or anything that would be directed more to people that identify as women about what role they could play at this point in time. Do we have a role that is that you'd put you'd address it to them? And what
For
might that
sure.
be?
What I've noticed in all the conflicts I've been in, and that's women are preeminent third-siders. Not that men can't be third-siders, everyone is a third-sider. But there's something about the relational power that women bring and the relational wisdom that women bring. And again, I'm speaking generally, but it's like, let me just give you just one example. Like when I was a graduate student, we were looking at the world's difficult conflicts and whatever, and the Middle East was one, and the Cold War and whatever. But one of them was the conflict in Northern Ireland between ostensibly the Catholics and the Protestants, right? And that was kind of considered to be just a sectarian conflict. It was people thought that it had some kind of religious coloration to it, and it was just like, and people were saying that's an impossible conflict. I mean, kids drink that, the animosity with their mother's milk. It's gone back hundreds of years. Yeah, it's
You'll
just
never solve it.
you'll never solve it, right? And what was so interesting to watch and to observe, and I went to Northern Ireland a number of times, was the role of women. It started with, you have two sides. You don't have association with each other because you're like, but mothers from both sides who had lost their in the troubles, they were called the troubles with
Hmm.
all the violence going on. They'd lost their brothers, their fathers, even I mean women too, but they lost they'd lost people. Catholic and Protestant, they started to meet across that line. And first they were kind of considered traitorous, but it's a little hard, to kind of like it's a mother who's grieving her lost one. They were able to make that first tenuous bridge. That created a certain permission, just created a little bit of space. And then it took a few years, and then the people of faith on both sides, like the priests and the ministers and so on, maybe Jesus wasn't in favor of this or whatever. Maybe he's the Prince of Peace. Okay, they're allowed a certain permission. And so they stepped in and had to reach across the divide. And then they opened up more space. And then the business people said, wait a minute, this conflict's bad for business. It's, we've got a big unemployment problem, or whatever. And they started to reach out. And then the last were the politicians. And I'm not saying it was perfectly like that, but there was a sequence
Hmm.
where the door was opened up by courageous women. And I've seen that happen in conflict after conflict after conflict in West Africa, in other places.
Where the door
Women
is opened
often,
up by courageous women.
it is,
Hmm.
it is, as third-siders,
Hmm.
standing for the whole, because they're basically people who, as women, remind people of the larger community, of the fact that we're all human beings, we're all this, we're all that, we live in a community, and that we all have children, and that tie somehow
Hmm.
is often the beginning tone that opens up the space for collaboration when the animosity is so high, and when anyone who
Hmm.
dares to talk with the other side is branded a traitor.
So, of course, it can be a scary world out there. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or for women about how to turn the dial up on this, because and I agree with you. I think there are a lot of women that can really step into their leadership through negotiate, into their leadership. And if you have any thoughts in terms of how that dial can be turned up.
Well, I mean, one thing, I mean, I know a lot of efforts, for example, in the field of negotiation in the UN in particular, to make sure that women are at the table. I'll
Right.
just give you an example from
Mm.
some work I did. I worked for about 6 or 7 years as a senior advisor to the president of Colombia when
I remember you talking about that work. Yeah.
when I first went to see him, he'd asked me to come see him in 2011, and I went to see him. Colombia had been experiencing this war with the principal and largest guerrilla group in the
Hmm.
hemisphere
With the
called the
FARC.
FARC.
Hmm.
And there were literally hundreds of thousands of deaths.
Hmm.
I mean, somehow in the States, we kind of, I don't know what happens, but we kind of have amnesia when
Right.
it comes to Latin America. Americans don't know. There are hundreds of thousands of
Right.
people who died in a war, many more than died right now, like in the Middle East or whatever,
Right.
but hundreds of thousands in Colombia
Right.
and millions of victims,
Right.
like 8 million registered victims.
Right.
And the United States was deeply involved in it. It wasn't just like we were deeply involved from the inception of it. Everyone, if you ask people in Colombia, everyone's for peace, but no one thinks it's possible.
Right.
And because no one could even remember a time when there had been
Well, there
peace.
had been la violencia in Colombia had gone way
Right.
back. I mean, it's been so much.
Well,
Yeah.
started with La Violencia and
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
guerrilla
Yeah.
thing. So
Right.
between those two, you've got about 60, 70 years. I mean, it's like
Right.
it was a long period of time. So it's the longest running war. And what was interesting about it, just to focus in, was there was a time, it took a long time, but it was a time in the negotiation when the question was, what do we do with the victims?
Oh,
8 million victims.
ugh.
Usually, oftentimes, the idea was, and President Santos, to his credit, decided to, sometimes you say, well, let's just settle the conflict and then we'll deal with the victims and we'll have some kind of truth reconciliation process. But he decided to innovate and basically ask the UN and the local universities to assemble representative groups of victims to go to the negotiations which were taking place in Havana,
Hmm.
in Cuba, and actually testify to the negotiators while the negotiations were going on
Wow.
as a way of kind of like,
Some kind of
let's
truth and
get the victims'
reconciliation.
voices
Hmm.
at the table.
Wow. Hmm.
And the majority of these delegations were women,
Mm.
often women of color.
Mm.
And there was a lot of resistance to this idea because
Mm.
it was like, first of all, it's going to be a lot of time, a lot of things, but also they're so deep in their trauma, they're going to ask for vengeance and
Mm.
whatever, they're going to come and they're going to be opposed this whole idea of sitting down with the other side.
Mm.
The opposite turned out. And they were all, this is all national television, so the whole country engaged in hearing their stories,
Wow.
right? In the great majority of cases, they issued joint statements and they encouraged the negotiators to go, to go deeper,
Right.
to actually conclude the deal.
Mm.
So it actually had the reverse effect
Mm.
of what people had feared it would have.
Mm.
And again, it was the voice of women was very, very prominent.
Mm.
I'll give you just one story
Mm.
from one of these women, which really was just as an example. There was a woman who told this story. Her name, if I'm not mistaken, was Pastora Mina. And she told the president this story. She was living in her little village there in the interior of Colombia. And a young man came to her door. He was wounded and he asked for help. And he was really badly injured. And she took him in and she put him in her son's bedroom and took care of him for some months. And then he healed. And as he was leaving, he came out into the parlor and he saw a picture of her with her son. And he said, "Is that your son?"
Mm.
And she said, "Yes." And then he fell to the ground on his knees and he begged for forgiveness. And she said, what's going on?
Mm.
He said, "I was the one who killed and
Mm.
tortured your son."
Oh, jeez.
And she said to him,
Oh my gosh.
she said to him, "Gracias, thank you." And brought him to his feet. And she said, "Well, why are you thanking me?" "Because you've just spared me the burden of hating you for the rest of my life."
Mm-hmm.
And so those kind of stories, and again, it's a mother, but and that so moved the president too. Because there were times in the conflict where a lot of people were saying, "Hey, forget the negotiation. It's going on too long. They're breaking the agreement, all this thing, breaking the agreements, killing, whatever, just end with it, like what's going on right now in the Gulf right now." But he stayed true to it. And partly because he was inspired by the courage of someone like Pastora Mina.
Amazing story. Oh my gosh. Amazing story. And I don't know whether I would have it in me. I mean, I think as a mother of a son, but humans have we have a lot of possibility, a lot of.
I don't know. I could go on with stories. I mean, it's just like, I mean, one story after another, but even from Colombia, like in the Middle East, I'll just give you one story. I don't know, that just came to mind. There was during the time of ISIS.
That seems like a long time ago.
It wasn't so long ago,
I
and
know, I
and,
know.
and ISIS just kind of roared out of nowhere, and then the most unbelievable atrocities, including mass rapes and just awful things to the Yazidi people and so on. And one of the things they did very early on was they overran in Iraq. There was a young cadets academy for Air Force. I don't know what it was. And there were boys who were maybe like 16 or 17, like 1,500 of them, and they slaughtered them all.
Gosh.
But I have a colleague, part of a project to kind of create a long distance walking path in the Middle East
I know.
that I've
It's
been
always
doing
so attractive to me. It's
for
like
20 years. Anyway,
yeah.
one of the things we sponsored him was to float down the Tigris. He was floating down the Tigris River from Turkey, Syria, Iraq, from the beginning, from the origin to the source there in the Gulf. And he was in this little raft or boat, and every 5 kilometers there's another group of something. Anyway, he had to stop for to camp or whatever, and he stopped at one point in a village or a little village, and this old woman gave him shelter. That amazing hospitality. Everyone wants to give hospitality. And she gave him shelter, and she told him the story of how a couple years earlier, during the time of ISIS, because her village was right across the river from where that cadets academy had been.
Mm.
And she didn't, no one knew what was happening, but she suddenly saw, she looked up one morning and she saw these young boys fleeing for their lives, like 10 or 15 or 20 of them fleeing for their lives along the thing, getting really excited. Just, I mean, just, she didn't even know what they were fleeing for their
Mm.
lives, but you could see that they were really like scared and running, and ISIS was in pursuit of them. And so she didn't think anything of it. She just told her sons, she said, go get the boats and row across the river and bring them over. And so her sons
Wow.
got the boats, and other people in the village got the boats and rowed these boys over. And then ISIS showed up on the bank with her AK-47s or whatever. And she's there, and all the villagers go to their hut and they grab their little rifle and gun and they all stand like a third side
Hmm.
in protection
Hmm.
right there and protected the boys, right? And so the ISIS didn't cross the river.
Hmm.
And my friend asked her, what did you do with the boys? She said, well, I just went and gave them a hug.
Oh. Oh.
And I mean that those kind of stories
Yeah.
are like, and again, it's the role of the woman, the role of the third side. It's like to a protective role in that situation.
Amazing stories that you have, and I don't, I don't want to take too much of your time. I guess as we're talking about, it's such a dicey moment, I think, for so many people. And I have children. I don't know, you know, looking at the future for future generations. If What are your thoughts about how to bring that kind of possibility, transparency, circles, hope? Sometimes I don't like the hope question, but honestly, I think it's also a useful question. Yeah, what are your thoughts about that for all of
Well,
our kids out there?
I believe humanity right now, we're on a kind of razor's edge. When I was young, used to climb, with ropes and climb up peaks and
Yeah,
cliffs. And sometimes you're walking on a ridge, right?
my
And
son
you
is
can,
a big mountain climber. I
oh,
know.
is he?
Oh
Oh,
yes.
there you go.
Actually,
So
now
you're walking.
now he's paragliding, which I'm not so
Oh,
happy.
really?
Oh my God. Anyway.
Well, young people, it's kind of like there's a kind of attraction to that kind of like you feel more alive somehow. But it's you're walking on an edge, a razor's edge, right? An edge of a ridge, right? And there's a chasm on one side, there's a chasm on the other, whatever. But I feel like humanity, we're walking on an edge right now.
Mm.
If you look down on one side, you can see enormous cause for despair. Oh, the poly crisis, the climate, I mean, just everything that's going on in the world, the wars, AI, the disruptive things of AI on the one hand. And on the other hand, there's all the possibilities,
Mm.
like AI is a good example. It's like, wow, it's revolutionizing people's lives. My sons, they're using it to transform their
Mm.
businesses and their dreams and whatever. But at the same time, so AI is a kind of a classic example.
Mm.
And we're on that razor's edge. And when you're on that razor's edge, it doesn't take that much to go one way rather than the other, right? Just a slight, if you're walking, slight thing. So we have incredible ability right now at this particular moment in human evolution to kind of nudge our trajectory onto a survivable path, a thrivable path of possibility, avert the worst and realize the best. And there's never been a moment when there's been more capacity for agency right now in the world in this disruptive moment because everything is up for grabs. So for young
What do you mean
people,
by capacity for, or you maybe you're
well,
going to
in
say?
other words, there's right now we're much more powerful than we ever were, and any individual.
Mm.
Partly because of, I mean, just AI would be an example, but you
Mhm.
can do so much more
Yeah.
than in a previous generation or in the previous generations. A person who holds a phone is holding more information and power than a king, the King Nebuchadnezzar or anyone else, or even like,
Right.
100 years ago. It's like,
Right.
it's astonishing. So we have potential, we have power. And the question is, will we use our own internal capacities that we have received from our ancestors for cooperation, for sitting in circles, for getting the whole system in the room as you like to do, for, can we do that in our, it's at small scale, and can we do it at the largest scale? I mean, we can do it, in our families,
I might add, I don't know what you think about this, but I think sometimes how we negotiate, even in the micro level, is almost a cultural act in and of itself.
and not almost, it is a cultural
Okay,
act.
okay. It is. And it's such a choice point right there about how we
It
gonna.
is. Yeah, and every one of us every single day goes through a dozen, 2 dozen, I don't know how many dozens of negotiations, small and large, and
Mm,
everything that we do in our personal lives, in our professional lives, in our community lives. And we have that choice. And that's the thing is we have choice.
mm,
We have the choice to say, hey, can we take even the most difficult situation and look for possibility there? Can we bring our natural human curiosity, our natural human creativity, and our natural human collaboration to bear even on things that are giving us real, I mean, they're very real problems, very real issues. And it's like a choice. At any one moment, we can choose to handle our conflicts destructively or constructively, and we're making that choice. It's like a switch.
mm,
It doesn't mean that it automatically brings you agreement. There's no automatic entitlement, but it does increase the odds
mm,
greatly if you approach the situation with a little more openness, realizing that in fact, life is a positive sum game.
mm.
Life is
Positive.
one in which it's just by its nature. What we
What do you
think
mean
of
by
as its,
positive sum? That's an interesting phrase. Positive sum game. I don't.
well, in game theory, there's the kind of like things like, okay, there's scarcity. It's like
Hmm.
it's zero sum. I win,
Yeah.
you lose,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But relationships, in every
Mm,
negotiation, there's a relationship. There's in any negotiation, there's always an ability for both sides to lose and both sides to benefit more than
right.
they would otherwise,
Right.
which is, call it a win-win. But I think what we're called upon these days is to realize that win-win even isn't enough. We have to remember the third win,
Hmm.
which is a win for the whole. Could be for the family, for the relationship, for the marriage, for the business, for the community, for the world. But we need to remember that third, a win for the third side.
The image is coming to me right now that you told of the bonobos when, because there are people that don't want to do that, that are like getting out of control, if you ask me. And you
Yeah.
have this great image of the bonobos when I guess some male bonobo would get out of line, the females would circle. You tell the, I mean, right? It came out of
No,
a.
that's exactly it. Well, I mean, it was actually, but maybe the most well-known research of bonobos early on was a Dutchman by the name of Frans de Waal. And he was telling me, observing this, the bonobos who are chimpanzees, but and they're actually there are two species of chimpanzees, the common chimp and the bonobos. And the bonobos, if anything, seem to be closer in many ways to human beings than in
Mm,
terms they're our closest cousins.
mm,
And he would observe that, that when a male bonobo was like pushing around a female bonobo, the male bonobo is a little bit bigger than the female bonobo. What would happen? 4 or 5 female bonobos would get together and just almost like linebackers on a football field, line up shoulder to shoulder
mm,
and slowly
mm,
back the aggressive male just to say, hey, hey, buddy, you may be more powerful than one of us, but you're not more powerful than 5 of us.
mm,
And just like ease off there and just equalize the power and that coalition power of alliances.
mm,
That's a key in any society is always that's what where the third side is. The third side is that coalition for peace, for safety, for belonging, for enough for everyone,
mm,
really. And that's what happens is when one tries a power move, the community around
mm.
engages to like, hey, no, this is a level playing field here. You're going to have to treat people, they didn't attack the other one. They're just like send a signal like, hey,
Mm.
back off.
So for future generations, that message is just the idea of choice and the idea of choice, possibility, the fact that we are on this precipice and what each of us does, it really
Matters.
matters. And it can matter from the micro all the way up to the macro. And in the moment, we each have a choice about how are we going to deal with this. And
That's it.
yeah,
And we're all born, I have I have two grandchildren, grandsons. It turns out that one's 1.5 and one's 4. They're my bosses, but I've been watching like
they're your
infants.
bosses. Is that what you said?
They're my bosses. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're my bosses. Exactly. Well,
Okay.
I'm working for their
Yeah,
generation,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
At this
I
point,
hear you.
it's like I'd like to see your generation inherit a world that is livable
Yeah.
and thrivable and possible,
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm taking on the first day of my first grandchild was born, I just, held this baby in my arms for about an hour,
Mm,
and just the look in the eyes, and there's so much possibility in every single infant. There's just so much possibility, and they love possibility. That's why play is all about possible.
right.
So we're born as possibilists. We're born as homo possibilists,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we all have that inside of us. And that choice, that agency that you're speaking to, is exactly we can cultivate these possibilities because we have that power, and not to let anyone take away that power from us, and certainly not to let us through despair forget that we have a choice in every single moment,
Mm,
and we'll fall, we'll make mistakes. I'm the first one to do that all the time. And then you recover, you learn, and you make the choice again. And collectively, that makes a huge difference.
mm,
I've seen that change whole
mm,
societies. I saw, I was with the Bushmen. Nelson Mandela was in jail. People were thinking this race war will go on forever in
mm.
South Africa. I came back to South Africa 5 years later. He was president. And the guy who had been
Yeah.
president when I
Yeah.
was first there was his vice president.
Right.
And it's like, how did that
Wow.
happen?
Right. Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
how did that
Right.
happen,
Yeah.
really? And that happened not just through the amazing leadership of one person, but the whole society got engaged. The women, the men, the labor unions, the businesses, the faith leaders of faith, the youth groups, everyone engaged. The whole society transformed itself.
Right. I just finished. I read recently A Long Walk to Freedom. I had never read the whole thing. It was such a great read. It was so moving to read the whole thing. And yeah. So William, as always, you have a way of always just giving me feeling of possibility, and I really appreciate that, and really appreciate your time. And if people want to follow people who I don't know if anybody doesn't know about you, but if somebody doesn't know about you, and they're how would they follow your work? The best way to follow your work?
Well, I don't know. I'm mildly engaged, not very much engaged in social media, but I do have a website, www.williamury.com, where you can find out a lot more information.
Yeah, yeah.
There are books there, but also there's like little audios, TED Talks. You just put in my name, William Ury, and just see what piques your interest. But I would just really encourage you to really activate your inner possibilists
Hmm.
and realize that we have it in it. I've seen it happen. It's been 50 years. I've been seeking out the hardest, most difficult, the most traumatic situations on the planet. And it's amazing to see, even in the midst of all that, humanity shine up and shine through. And
Hmm.
if they can do it, if the Irish could do it, if the South Africans could do it, if I mean countless peoples could do it, certainly we can do it.
For sure. And it's a longer question to ask you why you did seek all this out, but maybe that's for
Well,
another.
because I'll tell you,
Mm,
when I was a boy, I was born in Chicago, but then somehow at 6, my mother brought us to Switzerland, and I spent about half my childhood in Europe. And Europe was still, you could still feel the recovering from World War II. I mean, it
yeah,
wasn't that long,
right,
just maybe 15 years afterwards. And it was like, and in World War One, all the graveyards, and it was just these
right,
incredible wars. And there was every expectation there'd be a World War III. And even like, we used to ski, and like the ski in Switzerland, the place where you kept the skis was a nuclear bomb shelter, a big
yeah, yeah,
metal door. And it was like, I couldn't quite get, and the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, and I couldn't quite get why we human beings, and I could see I was with kids from all different cultures, different religions, and everything, but like we could get along, but why can't we all get along somehow? And particularly, there was that question. And so that's why that kind of awakened my curiosity of like, how do we deal with our differences
mm,
in a constructive way that actually can make the world that we want to live in?
mm. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And I will live with that question. I think so many of us live with that question. So thank you very much.
Yeah, great. And thank you for all your work, Susan. And I know you've put your life, this is your life's work as well. And it's just, it's beautiful to see. And it's how many people that you've lit up with your with your passion and curiosity and ideas. And so that's how it happens.
Yeah. Thanks a
So
lot.
thank you.
Thanks for listening. If this moved you, please like and share. And you can subscribe to this series on Substack. It's free. Just search Collaborative Hardball, where you'll see every one of these episodes as soon as they're released and my take on it. Hope to see you there and see you again soon.